Hi, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is
Life with
Twins. On our previous episode, we talked a little bit about the start of Nicole's induction, and we figured that going forward, we'll continue that trend. So the last place we were at, came to the hospital 11 a.m. They tried to induce you about 6 p.m. at night, and why don't you continue from there?
So at about, I think it was like 1 a.m. on Sunday, we were able to successfully get my Foley balloon in, and it came out around 9 a.m. So when you have the Foley balloon, it has a little tube that sticks out, and you kind of pull on it, and that puts pressure on your cervix. And eventually, one of those pulls, it comes out. It was getting to the point, once they put the Foley balloon in, they also started me on Pitocin, which is the medication that helps you to contract. So they were trying to hit me with both of them because we really wanted to have these babies. So at around 9 a.m, I wasn't feeling as uncomfortable. So, imagine pressure being put on your cervix with each contraction. It is uncomfortable. But I knew that I didn't want to get an epidural yet because I knew that the reason why I was uncomfortable was because of that balloon. And once that balloon came out, I wouldn't be as uncomfortable. So at 9, I woke up from a nap and I realized that my contractions weren't as uncomfortable. So I decided to pull on the balloon and it came out. So I think it wasn't on my cervix anymore, which is why I wasn't uncomfortable. So it came out, and when it comes out, you imagine that you're probably about 3 centimeters. They didn't check me because my water was broken, so they didn't want to introduce any bacteria. And so basically all day Sunday, we were just going up on the Pitocin. I started to get uncomfortable at around 24 milliunits of Pitocin, and you can go up to 32. And I knew that if I wasn't really making change, then there wasn't a point in me continuing to go on the Pitocin. Because I was getting to the point where I was like, I could use an epidural at this point. And I was starting to cry and become uncomfortable because we really hadn't gotten a lot of sleep either. Because we were so eager to have the babies that we didn't sleep very well, or at least I didn't.
I slept okay.
You got an Ambien. You slept great. So I was getting to the point where I was uncomfortable. So I had the nurse come in and check me, and I was 3 centimeters, which I knew I would be about 3 centimeters because of the balloon. So I was a little discouraged, and I decided that I didn't want to get an epidural because if I got to 32 of pit, which wasn't that far from where I was at, and I didn't make any change, and they were going to turn my Pitocin off. And so I wanted to be able to shower and move, and if I had an epidural, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So we decided to turn my Pitocin off at 24. And that was probably the best decision I made because I got in the shower and I felt so much more refreshed. And I was like, okay, I can do this again. We can keep going.
It was like resetting the computer.
Yeah, exactly. I just felt exhausted and tired and over it. And taking a shower really did help. So we went ahead and started another round of Pitocin. And I wasn't really contracting very much. And it took a while for me to get to that same level of pain. It actually took until Sunday night.
Sunday night?
Sunday night, kind of into Monday morning.
Yeah, because you did the delivery on Monday morning. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sunday night, the guy came in. I had to go and tell the nurse because you were like, no, I'm fine. But I could tell and that you were
Yeah. Well, my contractions were uncomfortable, but they were spaced out. So I was still every 5 minutes having a contraction. But because of Pitocin, I had to be on the monitor the entire time. And monitoring twins can be challenging. So I was kind of stuck in certain positions. And the bed was uncomfortable, so my back was hurting. And I just felt like I couldn't cope through my contractions anymore. Even though they were 5 minutes apart, I didn't feel like I had gotten a lot of sleep. So I decided that it would be best for me just to get the epidural. So Sunday night, Monday morning, I got the epidural. And thankfully I wasn't contracting very much, and I had time in between my contractions because the anesthesiologist had a really hard time placing my epidural. He had to do it a couple of times, and if I was uncomfortable, I don't think I would be able to sit through it. But we finally got my epidural placed, and then I had the best sleep ever. Because, you have back pain in pregnancy, and then the beds don't help at the hospital. And so, like, getting the epidural helped my back probably more than it helped my contractions. And so that was seriously amazing.
Right.
So I finally fell asleep.
But then Monday morning rolls around.
Yes.
And your doctor, your actual gynecologist was there. It was finally time for her ship. And when she comes in, that's when we had to make the decision, because it had been a while since they had been trying to get you induced, and nothing was still working. And so what did they say?
The whole time I was 3 to 4 centimeters, since my balloon came out at 9 a.m. on Sunday. So it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was already at my maximum level of Pitocin again. And so they decided to stop it and reevaluate. I just wasn't having a good pattern. I was only contracting every 5 minutes still.
Basically,
So,
for the people, the doctor came in and said, hey, listen, you have a choice, because what's going to happen is if we keep trying to induce you.
She was worried about my risk of bleeding, because I was pregnant with twins, so my uterus was ginormous with that. And then being on Pitocin makes your uterus tired. And so I had an increased risk of bleeding with that. And so she was like, if we continue, I worry about how much you're going to bleed. And I was already anemic, so my levels to start weren't that great.
And you wanted to keep trying.
I did want to keep trying. But then I developed a headache Monday morning, and I was like, well, maybe it's a caffeine withdrawal headache. So I drank some Coke, and I took a Tylenol, and it didn't go away. It didn't even minimize the slightest bit. And so my doctor came in, and we told her that, and she was like, well, because of that, I want to start you on magnesium. And basically magnesium relaxes your body so you don't have a seizure. Well, if it relaxes your body, it's going to relax your uterus. And my uterus already had a hard time contracting with Pitocin without anything stacked up against it. So adding magnesium on it, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. So it was really hard for me to accept having a C-section. Also because of the same reason why I didn't want to on Saturday, was because I wasn't ready yet. When you go through labor, you're kind of like, you kind of ease your way into having a baby most of the time. Some women do go from 0 to 10. But usually, you're like, oh, I'm 1 centimeter. Oh, I'm 3 centimeters. Oh, now I'm 6. Oh, now I'm 9. And so you kind of ease your way into having a baby. Well, I was 3 to 4, 3 to 4, 3 to 4. And then the doctor comes in and goes, I want to have a C-section. And I was like, okay, well, I just ate an Uncrustable. And most of the time they wait 6 hours after you eat before you have a C-section. And so I was like, we got like 6 hours, like it'll be fine. And then the anesthesiologist comes in and was like, I hear we're going to have a C-section. I'm like, yeah, but I ate. She was like, well, what'd you eat? I was like, an Uncrustable. She's like, what is that?
Yeah. She was from a different country. She had no idea what we didn't have Uncrustables where I'm from.
I was like, it's a peanut butter jelly sandwich.
Makes sense why you're skinny and healthy. Yeah. You don't eat trash.
What are you calling me?
I didn't say
And so she, referred to my doctor and was just like, well, if you want to go earlier, we can go earlier. And my doctor's like, well, I'd prefer, I want to start magnesium, but she's already at risk for bleeding, and magnesium relaxes your uterus, so it's just going to make my bleeding even more. And so she was like, I would prefer to start it after delivery. So if we can go now, then I can start it in recovery, versus if we can't go for 6 to 8 hours and she needs to start it now. So the anesthesiologist was like, okay, yeah, let's go. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. Because of COVID, we weren't allowed to have anybody extra come in. And I basically found a photographer that I wanted, at 16 weeks pregnant. And so we weren't able to do that. And so then one of my coworkers is practicing doing videography. And so I got it cleared with my manager that she could come in even with COVID, and do my delivery. And so that was really important to me. Well, because it happened so quickly, she was like on her way coming in, but she wasn't able to make it to the delivery. So I was very, very sad and bummed about that, because it's something that I had wanted for a while, and everything already seemed like it wasn't going according to plan. So yeah. Then once the anesthesiologist was ready, because they were doing an epidural, once she was ready, we rolled on back.
Now, let's actually talk about the hell you went through going through labor. I know we got running a little long, but let's just go through it, because I don't want to keep them waiting for another week to see how terrible labor was for you. Because,
oh my gosh.
Wow.
So because I had an epidural, they didn't have to do the spinal. They just give you medication through your epidural to make you numb for your C-section. So they give you medication, and then they do a test, and they're like, okay, do you feel cold? And I was like, yes, I feel cold. So then they just waited longer to have that medicine kick in, and then they did it again, and I was like, no, I don't feel cold. And then they pinch you really hard, and I'm like, I feel the pressure of the pinch, but I don't feel pain associated with it. And so they're like, okay, we're good to go. So they scrubbed my belly off with the soap, and I didn't feel the coldness there. But I was really nervous about feeling my C-section, just because I could feel the cold the first time. And then you kind of get in your head and you're like, do I feel cold? Do I feel a pinch? This is really important. I really need to know if I feel this or not, because if I do, then that's going to be a terrible C-section. So it wasn't until after Maverick came out and I was doing a skin to skin with them that I could feel more of the pain associated with my C-section. And it was awful. And I've never gone through it before. I've watched people go through it. And in the moment, I was just like,
but you're missing all the good parts. So when they started it, she's doing it around 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And when you're going through the C-section, they start slicing and dicing. And my main thing was making sure that I didn't pass out, because I didn't want to embarrass her. And she kept saying, you can't do it. You can't look down there. And I was like, I'm going to see this. So, but there were points where you were literally grabbing onto
yes, the IV pole.
The IV pole, because you were in so much pain when that was happening.
So let's rewind a little bit. One of the most amazing parts of my C-section that I'm very, very thankful for my nurse friends for is, typically with a C-section, after the baby comes out, they whisk them right to the warmer. And they stimulate, they dry them off, they check their vitals, and they do all of that over there. And then once they realize that the baby's stable, then they bring them over to mom to do skin to skin. Well, they did it immediately. As soon as they cut the cord, she brought me my baby. And literally, that was the most amazing thing ever. Because, rewind a little bit before that, the moment Hayden came out and cried, I sobbed like the biggest baby ever. It was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And it was hard because I couldn't physically see him because I had this drape. So I didn't get to see him. And so when she brought him right over to me to do skin to skin, that was seriously the most amazing thing. We've tried so long to get pregnant, and then here we are finally at that moment where I have the baby on my chest, and it's like, oh, this is my kid. It's just such an amazing feeling. And then eventually Mav came over and did skin to skin with me too. So I have been dying for this moment forever. And so I did not want to give them up. But it got to the point where I was feeling so much pain that I couldn't even enjoy my babies on me. And so I had to have them take my babies away and weigh them and do all their measurements. And it makes me sad that I missed that. But I was so uncomfortable. I couldn't even focus. It got to the point where I was disoriented. I could hear people talking and people trying to ask me questions, and I just couldn't figure out how to answer them. They were like, are you feeling pressure or are you feeling pain? I'm like, well, I feel pressure, but I also feel a ton of pain. I don't know how to answer your question. But I was thinking that I was the weakest person ever, because we tell people in labor, oh, your pressure can be so bad that it feels painful. I'm like, well, maybe this is just such intense pressure that it feels like so much pain. But then I could like wiggle my feet. And I was like, this is not normal. Like you should not be able to wiggle your feet in a C-section. So they gave me medications to help with the pain, but it wasn't helping. So they had to sedate me, which I was super bummed about, because then in recovery, I could like barely keep my eyes open and I was seeing double, and I just felt so disconnected from my babies, because I honestly don't even remember recovery very much.
So it
was brutal.
Rough.
Which is why I said, knowing what I know now, if I could do it all over again, part of me would rather have just gotten the C-section on Saturday, because likely with a spinal, it's more medication, they get you really numb, and I likely would not have had the same experience.
You never know until it's always hindsight's 2020. But that was the story of delivery. We can go into it, but we don't have the time, so we will shoot more on future episodes talking about what happened as they came out premature, how they had to stay in the nursery, stuff like that. So let's save that so we don't bombard you with too much information and bore you to death. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, please make sure to comment, especially you internet weirdos who like to say weird things. But other than that, we will see you guys next time.
Bye.